It's Christmas Eve 2023. You died, Dad, 6 days ago, December 18th, 2023. Speaking of death, you nearly killed me when I was 2 years old. You had kidnapped me from my mother and then left me alone in a very drafty room as a near infant. At that time, I suffered a lot from convulsions and high fevers that would put me in the hospital, and I believe this was one such instance. Had I not been hospitalized, I might have died right there. That's not all you did for me. Throughout my life, you avoided paying child support. For years, not only would you not pay, but you did everything you could to dodge payment, hiding money, putting assets in your stepdad's name, etc. You denied this, but I kind of know the lifestyle that I had, and I know the lifestyle of my mother. There was definitely no money that was coming our way that wasn't getting used and coming from you. In your fights with my mother, you often did things that had no short-term or long-term benefits and often had a cost to my family and myself. In one fight with my mother, in some kind of jealous rage, simply because even after you were divorced and you were already married, my mother actually wasn't even on a date, but you were worried that she might be. And as a response, you called the police and decided to make claims that my mom and babysitter were abusive to us in some ways. This caused the police to have to come and force their way into our home, and while I was asleep, examine my brother and I, and the entire time my mother was just worried that we wouldn't wake up and know what was going on, and luckily we didn't. Unfortunately, many years later, you would do the same thing to my half-sister when she was 5 years old, calling the police on her mother, my stepmother, and caused terror for her when she was in just kindergarten. I was 13 years old the last time I saw you or really tried to spend any quality time with you. Well, for years you were supposed to come and take us over the weekends. Every weekend, as I recall it, you would drive us up from New York to New Jersey where you were living. New Jersey was a very convenient location for you because it was an easy way to make it harder for New York to get money for my mother. Because being in New York, it was harder to garnish wages from New Jersey. Now, you were supposed to do this every weekend, and maybe it was every few weekends that we would visit, maybe a month or two. It was not always clear, but we do often remember my brother and I dressing up, putting on our jackets, getting ready, and waiting for you to pick us up, but never actually showing up. I was somewhat disappointed by this. I liked seeing my grandparents, and I even enjoy time with you. You can be fun and entertaining and personable. You weren't an ogre consistently by any means, but I was fine. I could move on. In fact, I probably became one of the biggest New York Giants fans ever because on Sundays when I was supposed to be spending quality time with you, I was watching football. In fact, one time you didn't show up. As a 3-year-old, I just decided I liked this because they wear the color blue, and that's where some of my loyalties were. But in any event, occasionally you did bring us up to New Jersey, and occasionally we did have a good time. But there were some things you did that made it clear to me this was a person that didn't really know how to care for his children and was willing to make the few times we spent together bad enough that I shouldn't really go out of my way to see or spend time with you. As I was around 12 or 13 years old, I noticed my time with you getting worse. The second to last time I saw you, it was a cold winter day and we were driving up from New York to New Jersey, and you did, as you often did, smoked in the car without rolling the windows open. This used to drive me crazy. I was already consistently car sick. I didn't like being around smoke. I knew it was unhealthy and I was uncomfortable around it. When I would ask you to roll down the windows, you would open it up about this much, maybe a centimeter or two, and claim, "Oh, the windows are open," like you were trying to pull a fast one on me. At no point did you think to yourself, well, I should be doing this for my son, not only making him comfortable in the few times I spend with him, but not causing him to be unhealthy. Everyone knew about secondhand smoke by then. This was no real mystery. But you didn't do that because you didn't want to be cold. See, you were decent at being good to people when you wanted to be and when it was convenient for you, and that's why a lot of people in the family actually have very kind things to say about you. In fact, I would too. But whenever it conflicted with your desires or your agenda, that's when your pleasantness ended. In that instance, and in the instance of when someone might take some of your money away from you, even your own children. That was the second to last time I saw you, and I started to get this picture of, I don't really want to spend time with this person. I don't like the car ride to and from. And we're not really bonding or connecting that strongly. So later that year in the summer, you picked me up again. You had been promising to take me to a preseason football game. It was the New York Giants versus the Buffalo Bills. I was excited and willing to enjoy that time with you. In fact, you were one of the reasons I became a Giants fan, not in that ironic way I mentioned earlier, but just because it's something we occasionally did as a family. It's one of the few connecting points that we even had at all, was this shared connection, watching our favorite football team, watching football in general. So this would have been a nice thing for us to do. But as you were driving me up from Brooklyn to New Jersey, I don't really feel like it. I mean, it's strange because I used to drive by Giant Stadium every time. In fact, another reason I was such a huge fan is we would drive by the Meadowlands, going through the New Jersey Turnpike and past the New Jersey Meadowlands, and I would just look out the window, looking at the stadium, admiring my favorite football team going there. It was this weird connecting point. But you didn't really feel like it, and decided not to do it, even after the promises and even after the fact that it actually just would have been one simple gesture that would have been a nice thing for us to do. Instead, not only did you not do that, but I was getting car sick in the car, as I normally do, and you had promised to stop, get some food, go to a diner, and then head home. And so I step out of the car, and feeling a little sick, I have a little bile that lands on the ground. Instead of responding like a mature adult and saying, I'm kind of a little grossed out, let's go home and eat, it's no big deal, but I'm a little queasy right now, you flipped out. How could you do this? I'm not, how can I eat like this? I can't eat right now. I'm so angry. Let's just go home. I'm not performing it quite as well, but it wasn't a pleasant experience, and you made me feel guilty about doing something that I hadn't done wrong at all. I mean, I would have been understanding if you felt a little queasy that you just didn't want to eat, but to freak out and make a big scene out of it like you were a 2-year-old throwing a temper tantrum rather than me being the child, continued this pattern that I always felt like the adult in this relationship. So we get to your place, and quite frankly, the only thing I remember about being at your place was hanging out in the backyard with the television, watching the Giants and the Bills play a preseason football game. I hadn't decided at that point that it would be the last time I spent time with you, but I did decide it would be the last time I would go out of my way to spend with you. Once I got home to Brooklyn, I just decided I won't call him. I'll never call him again. In fact, it was always your kids that had to call you in order to spend time with you, because you had this strange notion that that was a one-way relationship where it was up to the kids to establish the connections and never the parent. But I decided I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't angry, I wasn't mad, I wasn't bitter, but I wasn't really enjoying my time with you. I figured if you cared enough to reach out to your son, you would, and we could still spend time. And if you didn't care enough, you wouldn't, and I would move on with my life. And so I wouldn't speak to you for another 15 years. In speaking to you, you sort of apologized to me for not being the best dad and not always being there. Or actually, you didn't even say not always being there. In fact, you had trouble saying what it was at all that you felt bad about. So I tried to ask you, because I'm thinking, well, is this a real gesture? Do you really feel bad about anything you did or didn't do? Or are you just saying so because this is what you think I want to hear in some moment of desperation when you feel like you needed a son in your life? So I asked, if you weren't a great dad and you want to apologize for it, well, tell me specifically, what did you feel that you could have been better at. And you refused to mention it. You wouldn't mention one specific thing. You just kept saying, like you had always done, when we had you, we were young and stupid. And fair enough, I understand that. People are young and they're immature. But if you have regrets, what are those regrets? I mentioned the never speaking to me or never calling to me, and you made claims that you called and my grandmother would pick up and say that I didn't live there anymore. And that was probably true, but that's because you called like 3 years later. My life had changed, things had moved on. You claim to try to force money into people's hands as a way of paying child support. And, I won't go through the nitty gritty, but it kind of insults my intelligence. I mean, I know this didn't happen. Nobody turns down money and, just throws you out. And there's no reason for you to drive from Brooklyn or from New Jersey to Brooklyn to shove money into people's hands. And it just doesn't make any sense. In that entire conversation, you yelled at me for not looking you in the eye when I was 7 years old. Like, you felt uncomfortable. And, when I think back on it, I think you probably actually did feel really, really bad. You didn't know how to interface with me. You didn't know how to interface with the kid who was very bright, who was very sharp, and kind of introverted and not really comfortable around people he perceived as strangers. And I'm sorry, but you kind of presented yourself mostly as a stranger. The level of comfort and familiarity with you wasn't going to be present. I always laugh at that story. I always laugh at the fact that my adult dad was upset with his 7-year-old son for being awkward around him. I find it both sad and kind of amusing at the same time. I was around 26 years old in that conversation, and I think it was the last conversation I ever had with you. And it made me realize that there was just no way we could communicate, and that was fine. I'm okay with that. As I get older, I look back at what I might have missed out on. It would have been nice if you had used the money that you had to support your kids. Myself, my brother, my stepsister, and to a degree, my stepbrother, though I'm not quite sure fully what happened there. But when I look at my life and the lives of others and what makes people successful, I don't really think it's money as a starting point that sets people up for success. I believe it's things like knowledge and people who set a good example, let you see a path for success in one or many areas. I didn't have that with you. It's unfortunate. But I've learned to see the positive in everything. Because seeing the positive in everything brings opportunities. So while I had a void in my life for seeing a male figure and seeing where that male is successful in certain areas or could show me a good path for a life moving forward, I had to intrinsically fill that void. And throughout my life, I'd done the best to do that. And because I didn't have you or another real great male role model in my life, I always looked towards the best. I looked towards what made Michael Jordan as successful as he was, what makes Elon Musk as successful as he is. I even reached out to some people who are doing some great things, and they've connected with me. I've learned how to be the person I need to be in order to be attractive to those types of people. So in a weird way, you set the bar so low that it allowed me to just be completely free and set the bar as high as I possibly could. Who were the people that I wanted to learn from? Who were the people that I wanted to be like? To be the best version of myself that I could be. Maybe to a degree, subconsciously, I had a chip on my shoulder to be the best, to show you and others where I could go in my life and where I'm still working towards and headed. I think that might be a little bit of it, but not all of it. I think I was going to be that type of person no matter what. But if I do have gratitude, it's knowing this. I'm struggling to see the great things about you, given everything I know. And yet, I always try to find one quality in every single person, no matter how heinous they are, one benefit, one thing that I could look at, so I could borrow from that and learn and grow and be better than I otherwise would be. So, in a somewhat ironic way, my gratitude to you is that you were such a void, that I had to search for that. I had to find things in every person I could to be the best version of myself that I could be. And for that, you have my gratitude.